Hello, pumpkin. Hello, pumpkin. It's pumpkin spice season still. It will be till Christmas. Then it's over. Then it's just black coffee season. Anyway, welcome to the show. My name is Dean. Nice to see you. We've got a mishmash today. We've got quite the selection of individuals here. I like all of them individually for different reasons. And it's Friday, so we thought we'd have some fun and shake things up a little bit. A little Yahtzee, a little emotional Yahtzee. Who doesn't want to play some emotionally Yahtzee? Caryma Saad is going to join us, of course. She is a gonzo journalist and lawyer and one of my very good friends. Obviously, we work together. So we're going to ask her opinion on a couple of things. The hearings going on. We'll talk about that. We've got a few other things to get to. My friend Paul Atkinson from the True North Eager Beaver podcast is here as well. We've got a couple things to get to with him, including and not exclusive to the Emergency Act hearing and what went on in Ottawa. And back by popular demand is funny because I got like so much hate mail the first time we had this cat on. And it kind of subsided after a little bit, but it was one of our biggest podcasts because everybody wants to hear from people, right? Specifically when you want to hear from people that you don't get a chance to hear from, or you've already passed judgment on, or you hate because of things that they've done and how you perceive people. Now, listen, our guest today is an organizer for the Convoy. He is taking part in the hearing, which is going on in the in the beautiful city of Ottawa as we speak. I haven't watched a whole bunch of it today. I've just been kind of leafing through it. Boring as fuck, if you ask me. It needs to be more sensational, laser light show, maybe a pony, something fun like that. But it hasn't been. And we've been getting dribs and drabs. Of course, this is in reference to the Emergency Act. Once you engage in the Emergency Act, which we saw with the Convoy, there is an immediate review of using that Emergency Act. So that review is going on now. It's called a hearing. And you got one side going nuts. You got the other side going nuts. But the narratives that are coming out of this are crazy. And joining us to talk about that and much more, Paul Atkinson, ladies and gentlemen, from the True North Eager Beaver podcast. Paul, you've been following this stuff. Am I weird? By the way, nice to see you, you beautiful bastard. Nice to see you.
I'm doing my tribute to Sherry DeNovo with my glasses today.
Yeah, no, I love Sherry DeNovo. She was great. She was awesome on this show, wasn't she? Anyway, yeah, I got my Sherry DeNovos on too. But it's been fascinating, right? Because I've seen cock blocking, I've seen sewering, I've seen people back up the bus, throw other people under the bus, public officials, city officials. Ottawa police has effectively been disrobed as a useless bunch of fucking Lugans. Yep. You know, the Ontario Provincial Police, they've contradicted themselves several times. We'll get into that. But it's fascinating to me because you've got two different sides and all this information is coming out. But, you know, the one commonality between both sides, Paulie, is they're like, hey, the cops are crooked as fuck.
Basically. Basically, that's what it's been. And all of the evidence points to it as it looks like. And we talked about this morning on the morning show. There's evidence that points to slowly didn't give a shit and may have been, you know, part of it. I got to change my glasses. These are no good for the computer, but that was for my Sherry.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, change those shades.
There. These are computer. That's much better.
But,
you know, was he in on it? I don't know. Did he support it? Probably from afar because he did sweet fuck all to anything to stop it, to interrupt it. I mean, the aspect of, violating charter rights, we can't stop trucks. That's not true. They have DUI programs. They block streets for parades. This is not new. I can't stop the truck. That's bullshit, and we all know it. So it's questionable. The evidence, the circumstantial evidence points to he was supporting it. Maybe not directly, possibly indirectly. We know he'd sent money to certain conservative leaders that were supporting the hell out of it. So, you know, and that's a matter of public record.
Did that come out today? Did it really?
Oh no, this came out months ago. It's a matter of public record. He donated $500 or $600, I think. Was it to Maxim or Skippy? I can't remember. One or the other. Yeah. So, you know, the police obviously is a complete dereliction of duty. Doug Ford's been thrown under the bus, justifiably so, because I mean, come on, he did nothing. But then he stood next to the Prime Minister and went on about, oh, I'm shoulder to shoulder. Of course you are, Dougie, because your neck is on the line, you lying son of a bitch. Actually, let me retract the son of a bitch part. I don't know his mother. I know she was married to his father, so that doesn't make her a bitch. So I was wrong, incorrect there, you know. He's an asshole either way.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny because I'm a destroyer of things, generally speaking, but like I've been trying to find commonalities between pro-convoy people, anti-vax people, and people who are vaccinated and hated the convoy. And these are very similar tacks that we're taking, right? And joining us to talk about that and much more, please welcome back to the program one of the organizers, Tom Marrazo. He's a former veteran as well. Tom is here. Great to see you, Tom. And of course, joining us for this as well, please welcome lawyer, gonzo journalist, wearer of incredible glasses, Caryma Saad, ladies and gentlemen. Caryma's here.
Hello, Caryma.
But are you getting that, Tom? Like, because you and I had a little chat before we went on, and you and I are diametrically opposed to each other. We were talking about it earlier. Like, you think I'm insane. I'm going to die in 5 years from the vax. I think you're insane, and you should have got vaccinated. But at least we have common ground, and we're able to kind of talk about it. But to Paul's point, are you from your side, are you kind of taking this in and coming up with similar talking points to people who might be on the other side of your ideology spectrum?
Yeah, I gotta say, you can hear me okay, right? You can hear me fine?
Doing great. Yeah.
Okay, good. I've got to say, it is, I've been sitting in the audience the entire time, listening to all the testimony of various people within the government. And I got to say, it is incredibly bizarre to listen to the things that I've listened to in that room. You know, it makes you want to laugh, cry, vomit, and everything in between that. And you know, there's a lot to unpack here, right? I don't even know where to begin, but to be honest, I look and I have these fundamental questions about all the things that I'm listening to each and every time I go in and I hear this testimony. And, you know, we use this term illegal occupation. Okay. And I have a feeling that this one's going to trigger Paul. We use this term illegal occupation, but I have yet to hear any testimony whatsoever at any point. At what point did this thing turn illegal? Because even slowly, the OPP, even the politicians themselves said, hey, they all had a they all have a charter right to come here and actually protest. Justice McLean, during the Horn injunction, said, you have a charter right to be here and protest this. But at what point, and it is not clear to any of us, or certainly not clear to me at this point, when did it turn illegal? And we can talk a little, you know, I'm not the lawyer, Caryma's the lawyer, other people are the lawyers, but listen, I'm influenced by all this legal stuff just through osmosis because I'm constantly surrounded by seven lawyers. Mm-hmm. And when you look at what's happening in the inquiry, I mean, I'll stop talking so everyone else can jump in here, but there is a lot to unpack here. And all I know is I'm seeing a huge difference between an elected official and a salaried, non-elected public servant. And their mentality, their truthfulness, their testimony is vastly different. It's almost like watching a show between an episode of Survivor with the elected officials and just people that are going to work every day trying to do their jobs, being as professional as they can be. It is a really bizarre thing to watch. I've got to say.
I want to get into that real quick, and I want to talk about you know, just the disparity between what we're seeing, but I also want to find commonality in what we're seeing. And what we're seeing when you say, you know, the elected officials and non-elected officials. Yesterday, Cormac McSweeney caught up with Pierre Poilievre, who's been a big supporter of you, been a big supporter of the convoy. And he's getting sewered for the comments he made yesterday. And I'll just paraphrase. He basically said, you guys should have left after the first weekend, but he still supports your right to protest, but effectively threw you all underneath the bus after he used you all to have photo ops and get sound bites and use the movement and co-opt the individuals involved in this whole thing so that he could strip the leadership from Aaron O'Toole and, of course, ascend to the leadership himself, which is exactly what happened, and has maintained this sober perspective that says, hey, you know what? I like the convoy people. Everybody should be heard, all that other stuff. And I don't have a problem with the illegal occupation or convoy or protest, however you want to say it, which lasted well over 3 weeks, which displaced people, all that other stuff. We'll get to that in a minute. That's just kind of roughage. But, you know, when you hear that as someone who thought he was like, that guy's our guy. And keep in mind, I think he's insane too. But you guys are like, that's our guy. Now he's just taking you and fucking throwing you under the bus because he's got a general election to win. That's got to make you feel a little bad about things, does it not?
Well, I can go all the way back to February and tell you that I personally, we produced a document through the lawyers and everything called Roadmap to Freedom. I personally sent him a copy of the document, and I said, look, I just want one of you in the federal government to come forward and talk to us. So on his public email, I mean, I wasn't expecting that he was sitting there on his BlackBerry or on his iPhone or whatever and responding to emails, but I thought it would make its way to his staff. To this day, I don't even have so much as a read receipt. Now, he did, and I mean, it was obvious. I mean, it was really obvious to me that he was using the trucker convoy. And what's the term that we use nowadays in popular culture? He appropriated the convoy for his own uses, and so did Candice Bergen. And I expressed that sort of discontent to Dean Allison when James Topp and I met with the Conservative MPs in the summertime, in the middle of June. And I said, you know, nothing pissed us off more than when Candice Bergen went and did a photo op at a coffee shop, and the very next day walked into the Commons and said, okay, truckers, you've proved your point, now go home. It's like, we knew Candice Bergen was going to do stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we didn't care because we knew something was up between the NDP and the Liberals. It just wasn't public yet. And so we didn't really think that the Conservatives were in a great position to help us out. But what is more disturbing is after the fact that, you know, the convoy's over, they go into a leadership race, and Poilievre gets on there and he's campaigning saying he supported the trucker convoy. Well, I'm sorry, how exactly did you support the trucker convoy? Because I didn't see any of the Conservatives show any public moral leadership of any kind, or do something that was even remotely substantive to prove that they supported the trucker convoy. What I think they did is they were just walking that fine line between, hey, what we're going to do is a few photo ops, and then eventually, if it's advantageous to us in the future, we're going to say, hey, look at this photo. We were on their side. But if not, they could say, well, you know, I mean, we met with them because it was the reasonable thing to do. And Justin Trudeau wouldn't do it. So they wanted to wrap that around his head, right? Mm-hmm. So they walked a really, really fine line. But in terms of public support for the convoy, absolutely none. And no other political party did either. It wasn't like the NDP certainly didn't. The Liberals, well, hey, we were here to talk to them, but that never happened. And the Conservatives, what in the Bloc? Forget it. The Bloc were like,
oh, dude, they just stole your shit. That's all they did, right? Like, you know, when you think about it and you see the way that they're acting right now, Caryma's laughing, but Caryma, that's true, right? Like Pierre Poilievre just basically stole all their shit and then used them. And then today, when he gets asked about it, he's like, oh, I think they should have been gone after the first week. Like,
he's a lying piece of shit.
There's no question that people were being used, and I think, you know, we could probably apply the same lens to protesters who were out there on the ground as part of something that they thought represented one thing. You know, I'm not sure how much substance ended up being conveyed or any meaningful positive change made. Same idea where you get swept up and used, and that's that's my observation.
Yeah. Hey, at the end of the day, nobody cared.
Go ahead.
Cared about any party except the Liberals. We weren't there to talk to anybody else except Liberals. But, you know, I did make a statement where I said, look, why don't you guys, all of you, and I said, why don't all of you, the other parties, come together and form a coalition, figure out this guy, figure out how to make the change that a lot of people in this country, both Liberals and Conservatives, wanted to see. And what I never said was, hey, I'll be part of that. And I, even the next day I said, look, we don't have any intention whatsoever of being part of this government. What we said is, you guys come and sit at a table, you figure out a coalition. And by the way, what nobody knew at the time was that the NDP and the Liberals had already formed official co-op.
Aren't you kind of backtracking in the same way as Polyev, though?
Yeah,
like you're sort of backtracking in the same way, where it's like, yeah, I was part of and privy to these discussions, but I didn't want the power. I didn't want any of that responsibility.
They were only our
Tom,
discussions.
I have video of you here. I have video of you here saying, I'm going to sit down with the Bloc and the NDP and have a discussion with them.
Yeah.
And I will sit down at the table. So you've suddenly become a government official, a representative of the people. Nobody voted for you. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. But I do, as a tax-paying voter of this country, have a right. It says right in the terms of service to be an MP, to be heard as a constituent in this country. You're right. I did say that, and I stand by what I said. And what my intention in that live stream was, I've got a table. You guys come and sit at this table. You guys figure out how to form a coalition to Trudeau on his butt. As what is the actual official mechanism within government. You form a coalition and then you go deal with Justin Trudeau. What I didn't say was, hey, I want to be in the government. I never asked to be in the government. I said, I got a table. You guys come sit at it. You figure this shit out. And they never did, right? And instead, what did the main media talking points say? Tom said he was going to form a government. I never said I was going to form a government. I wasn't even thinking that it would form a government. What I want was for them
it kind of
to
lends
come together
itself,
and form
but
a
it kind of
coalition.
lends its. Yeah, but it kind of lends itself. I think what he's saying, based on your words, it lends itself to the idea that you're gonna usurp the democratically elected government, because you're like, come sit at the table, we'll take over the government, we'll install you guys. That was generally the feeling and the thinking, right?
Not we. I said for them to come to the table and them do.
I've got your MOU right here in front of me.
Whose MOU is that, Paul? But by the way,
James Botters.
They did that.
Yeah. James Botters.
We don't have an elected. We don't have an elected majority government in this country, do we? What we have is a coalition government between the NDP.
No, we don't have a coalition. It's not a coalition. It's not a coalition.
It is a coalition.
By definition, it is not a coalition. A coalition government is when sitting members of the opposing side, the NDP, because they're in opposition, would be brought into the Liberal Party as part of their caucus. That's a coalition. This is not a coalition. This is an agreement in principle, and it can end at any time.
They've actually written it down. They've written it down.
It's not a coalition.
It's a partnership between the... I don't care what you call it.
Yes, it's a partnership. It's not a coalition.
Words have meanings. What do you mean you don't care what we
Words
call
have
it?
meanings.
Oh. The votes. Look at the vote records. Look at all the vote records that we've had since the two of them have publicly announced that they would come together in a coalition, marriage, I don't care what you call it, still voting along the same lines to achieve both of their party objectives, and they have voted down every mandate that has been put forward.
Yeah, that's called government. They work together to achieve goals. That's how government works. They work together to achieve goals.
I wanted them to come together and vote
you
wanted the other guys.
You wanted the other guys, and the other guys don't have the power. Not to mention the fact that, Tom, you do have a guaranteed voice as a constituent. You do. But you don't get to sit down and talk to the Prime Minister as a constituent. You go to your member of Parliament and have that person talk to the Prime Minister. That's how it works.
So
do I need to teach civics again?
Yes. For 2 years, people in this country affected by the mandates, 2 people protested in every major city in this country for 2 years. And did we ever get a meeting? Did anyone ever listen? No, never. No. So guess what? We're desperate.
Those were provincial mandates, Tom.
And you go see the...
Then you should have went to the head of Queen's Park.
Really? Do you think
most of the mandates were provincial?
Is the province in charge of Section 6 of the Charter, or is that federal? Who controls the...
Well, actually, all governments are subject to the Charter, as are like government agencies. And
and who puts federal mandates? It is the Minister of Transportation. Yes.
What were the federal mandates that you were fighting against then?
Mandates stopping people from flying. What's that?
From flying? That was your big thing. Well, let's back that up a little bit though too there, Tommy. Is that no, but we're looking at like we're kind of dancing around around the issue, and the issue is, and we can rehash it, you know, how policy works, what a coalition looks like. We can get caught in the weeds. I want to talk about this hearing, and I want to talk about how you're understanding it, and then I want to relate it back to the people who were also there, including Paul, including Caryma, who you saw there. Because this is what we're trying to figure out now. We're trying to establish fact, right? And the facts that have been established so far are, you know, feed whatever into it you want, whether it's mandates, provincial, federal. We were here for mandates. We're here to hang the prime minister. We're here to take over the government. We're here to arrest senators, all that stuff. I mean, you know, James Bott, whoever. I mean, like there were 3,500 different individuals who had an idea of what was going on there. And it's impossible to go, that's wrong, this is right, that's wrong, this is right. It's just impossible. So let's stick to what we got here. What we got is a hearing that's basically telling us that the Ontario Police, Ontario Provincial Police, and Ottawa Police Service have been absolutely 100% complicit in what happened in the city of Ottawa. Now, we've already established that the Conservatives used you and the movement to be able to achieve what they needed to achieve. But it feels like the police service has done the same thing. It feels like the Ottawa Police Service used this as an opportunity, and this is what we're getting at, to have an insurrection in Ottawa Police Service themselves, to have, which has been kind of the running theme. Now, when I think about where you're at and where, as you sit there from your side of the equation, which is again the complete opposite of what I believe is really going on, but I find it to be impossible to think that you can't, or anybody who was at that, or pro Convoy, anybody there would have an alternate opinion that the police are really at fault for a lot of the stress that was put on that city. And it just looks to me like there were some kind of cooperation. Did you ever talk to anybody at Ottawa Police Service? Did you guys have, because it was one of the threats and one of the things that we heard quite a bit over that thing is like, we've talked to the members of Ottawa Police Service. A lot of them are with us. A lot of them are staying with us. And what we're seeing and hearing coming out of the hearing is sort of propping that idea up that you were telling the truth, that a bunch of Ottawa Police Service, maybe OPP, maybe RCMP, we're part of this equation. We're involved in it to some extent. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, you know, there's a couple of different issues with this, right? And we did on a daily basis. I must have talked to the police liaison officers maybe 10 times a day, depending on what was going on during the day. We were doing our best to actually work with them. And I can tell you, like you said, you got 3,500 people there, you know, off the wall. I mean, it's the 1090 rule. 10 of the people occupy 9% of your time, right? And there was a constant back and forth between us and the police. But when you listen to this inquiry, you hear the police.
But had you recruited other police officers? Did you have conversations with Ottawa police officers that said, hey, listen, we're going to be helping you, we're going to be enabling this? Like, were those conversations happening privately?
Not to my knowledge. We weren't doing that. We were more than happy that if they were in uniform to this, we were trying to get this constant conversation, lines of communication open with the police. We knew that our issues were solely with the federal government, and there was a meeting on around the 7th. It was with the Police Services Board, and we all watched between Diane Deans, she's the president of the Police Services Board, and Peter Slawley and the other council, and to the things that she was saying. We were like, oh my God, we need to, this situation is going to get out of control. We fundamentally approach, and we realized, we looked at Peter Slowly and we said, if we don't do something to take pressure off of and off, he's going to burst. He's going to lose his mind. And so we made active steps to get meetings with the city specifically so that we could try to take pressure off of the residents of Ottawa, and to consolidate more vehicles up on Wellington. And in the testimony, that's exactly what was going on until OPS screwed it up, and so did screwed it up. And that's all, it's all been testimony. We're now on day 7 of testimony. We were working with the city and with the police to move the vehicles away from areas as much as possible and get more on Wellington. We were all working to that end. And the Ottawa police, one night that I was involved, on the 5-yard line, pulled the deal. And it was the leadership of the Ottawa police services that they couldn't stop fighting with each other. And they pulled the plug on the police liaison officer that I was working with, truckers were working with. It was all hands on deck. We were all talking to the individual truckers, trying to say, look, this is the best strategy for what we're doing. Put the pressure on the federal government, less on the city, less on the police. But that's not what the political people wanted. From day one, I'm telling you that the testimony, the Councillor McKenney and this Fleury guy, and some of the members of police from day one, no interest in ever talking to any of us. All they want to do is give themselves extraordinary powers to break the backs of this convoy. That's, they never wanted any dialogue in the room with the city men. And this is an issue here, is that we were trying really hard to work the police to that effect. I can tell you myself, we had on Wellington the better. We didn't care about the vehicles, want them going far reaches or anything. What we wanted was more vehicles on Wellington, because that's who we had the issue with, and they were located on Wellington. So it's police management, the senior management, the Ottawa Council that completely pulled the entire thing. Deal fell apart, and then, you know, Watson was hedging his bets, saying, okay, I'm going to work with the convoy people. It's an advantage to me, but I'm also going to be putting things in declared and go in and stomp the guts out of these people. And he got his way.
If you really didn't want to harm the residents of this city, why didn't you move all of the trucks out after the first weekend to the parking lot at the baseball stadium and occupy Wellington? You didn't do that. You tried to negotiate to pull. No, get them the hell out of there.
Why
you occupied my neighborhood for 3+ weeks. On night 5, I lost my mind and went nuts in the streets because I couldn't deal with it anymore. I couldn't sleep. And I'm living 10 blocks
but you know there was an
south
injunction
of Parliament Hill.
Okay.
Yeah, it took a week to get the injunction in place to stop the horns, and it didn't stop them permanently because they started up again.
Yeah,
what's your point?
I was 3 blocks the entire time I was there. I slept just fine.
Oh, well, fuck you.
What's your point?
Fuck you. I didn't sleep. Okay. That's my point. Okay. I didn't sleep. I've got video of me at 8 o'clock at night trying to watch TV, and I can't because all I hear is fucking horns, and I'm 6 blocks away. You slept. Good for you. I didn't. This is my fucking neighborhood. Fuck you.
Okay.
That's bullshit, and you know it.
Okay.
You know it.
You got anything else?
Oh, I got
or
lots.
Is that all you got?
I got lots, but I'm going to be calm. I'm going to calm down now because
listen.
I've got some of my anger out.
But hang on, Tom. Like this is like, I know that it's been difficult for a lot of people in Ottawa, right? And the last time I had you on, I purposely just did a one-on-one. And during that one-on-one, you told me that you didn't believe people like Paul, who lives in rent-controlled housing, who was displaced, who has a litany of issues that he's dealing with and had to deal with, and literally lost his mind, couldn't sleep for several days. Had to get some very serious therapy. He's not the only guy I work with that went through that in Ottawa, that whole scene that you guys brought downtown just to hurt the prime minister, or just to get a change in government, or just to get a conversation. Like, this is a real response from someone who was actually seriously affected, and it still has been and still has triggers because of what happened. And last time we had you on, you said you didn't believe him. Well, this is it. I mean, this is what facing these people looks like, dude.
And that's fine. And I understand where he's coming from. But you want to know something? People in this country for 2 years protested because they couldn't go see loved ones that were dying in hospitals. They couldn't see the birth of their grandchildren.
And that is all done from a provincial aspect, not federal. That's provincial. All of the mandates, with the exception of crossing the border into the United States, which is stopped by the U.S., they're provincial mandates. I'll say it again. The mandates are provincial.
Well,
that's correct. They were, because they're all gone.
Take a ball. We went to Toronto. We went to people in Edmonton, went to Toronto, in every. What changed?
Then why did you take over my city for 3 weeks?
What changed? You know what changed? When Justin, it's not your city, resident of a city, you don't own the city. And in case you haven't known,
I pay taxes here, I live here, I'm going to die here. It's my city.
To get it through. Oh, your home
is my city just as much as it is my neighbors.
Located in protest. Well, listen, Paul, you can go.
I've seen thousands of protests. I've lived here for 39 years. Thousands of protests. That was an occupation, not a protest. Protests don't encamp in the streets and shit in the streets and threaten people and set off fireworks at all hours and set up stages and have DJs going nonstop for 3 weeks straight. I've seen thousands of protests. I've been involved in protests. That was an occupation, not a protest.
An illegal one.
Yes.
That's what I get out of this is, you know, and because it's like we see what we saw. We went through what we went through, you know, and in terms of what Paul went through, you know, you can see it's visceral. You can feel it. It is an emotion. It is very fucking heavy stuff. And he wouldn't want that for you, Tom. Like, I don't want that for you.
I wouldn't.
I don't want that for anybody.
Okay.
And so like, I think the parsing of what happened, you know, there's got to be some kind of common ground, which we always try and find in these conversations, Tommy, to say that, you know, these people were severely damaged by what happened. And we're currently fact finding through the EA, where we're learning about the impotence of the Ottawa Police Service. We're learning about some lies from OPP. We're learning about how these guys didn't really give a shit about the people of Ottawa, didn't give a shit really about you guys either. And we're also learning about extreme incompetence in the police state. Now, when it comes to that and what exactly was playing out in the city of Ottawa, you know, when both sides, including your side, are pointing the fingers at bad policing, what are you pointing the fingers at bad policing of? The fact that none of this stuff really mattered to the people of Ottawa, or the fact that they rolled the dice 30 years ago and they chose to move there because it was protest central? Like, you know, I find a lot of these points that we try to make to dumb down the idea that this wasn't a serious event that didn't require some immediate, which we didn't get, some immediate relief for the people of Ottawa. It's very difficult, like, to take any side of anybody who's pro-convoy when we saw what we saw and we went through what we went through. And you're saying you slept fine, it was no big deal. That's a complete discontinuance of empathy for anybody else around you, to the point where, like, I look at you, Tom, and I feel empathy for you, which is why I want to have you on the show to talk about where you're from, to connect on a personal level. Like, before, you and I were just having a discussion before we got started about solar panels and this geodome that you're living in. I'm bringing it up, and I enjoy these tweets. I'm like, that's Tom's life. It's a cold morning in a geodome. He honestly loves it, doesn't take things for granted. You're enjoying that experience, right? We've got these beautiful Jackery, you know, solar panels, which you use to heat, make coffee. This is a beautiful, like, as a human being, I look at these pictures and I put myself in your situation, right? That's what we're supposed to do. It's how we work well together, where we say, I'm going to put myself in Tom's shoes. That's why I reached out to you the first time, where I'm like, I want to have you on because it's important that we have a conversation, because we both think each other are crazy. But what I find difficult to understand with you and certain people involved in this movement, because I operate from a position of empathy, whether people believe it or not, is that you have no empathy for this man. That we discount this man's negative experience, or anybody else there.
Okay, so a couple of things here.
Yeah.
Dean, you and I both talked about having a second show together. The thing that I said is, look, because you, Dean, you're getting attacked by your supporters for having me on, and I get people saying, why are you going on Dean's show? And my answer has consistently been that you and I, we have politicians in this country that have been running around at every party, ripping this country apart, and they've been doing it for years. But you and I have an opportunity to sit down and say, look, we disagree fundamentally on most things, but we've got an opportunity to come and sit and have a conversation. We have an opportunity to, I don't want to say show some leadership, but at least set an example. And this is why you and I have always agreed to do these shows together, right? I get attacked for coming on the show. I'm sure you got attacked for being on here. But the fact that you and I have always been willing to sit down and talk on the air and let people view, and I'm watching the comments, I'm getting lit up by a couple of people that hate the ground I walk on. And I want to say that I'm not unsympathetic to Paul. I'm really not. And I'll give you an example. We had a doctor come into the headquarters where I was at the Arc Hotel. The doctor came in and he says, and this is before the injunction, and he says, look, we're doing psychometric testing with a young boy. Is there any way that you guys can stop the horn honking? Appointment is between this time and this time. And you know what? We put the word out, and there was no horn honking down that entire street on Slater for the entire time for this kid's appointment. It's not that we weren't sympathetic to people, but you have to understand, we had gone through a lot of stuff as citizens of this country, all over the country.
You seem to think that none of us did. I went through it too.
Also, like, are people supposed to be putting in requests for sort of the basic silence that we're entitled to?
Let Tommy finish, then we'll go to Caryma, and then we'll go to Paul. We'll let Tom finish, Caryma, Paul, and then we'll finish up.
So look.
Go ahead.
Now I lost my point, but I'll find it again. I'm unsympathetic to people like Paul. That's right. But here's a reality. My own personal example here, okay? My cousin's son killed in a motorcycle accident.
Sorry to hear that.
Was not allowed to attend his in the funeral because of federal border mandates. There was, and I campaigned on that's where I met Caryma, was in Peterborough. I was campaigning, and every day I had people and telling of the horror stories of what was happening in the long-term care facilities. Again, a provincial issue. But there was this sudden shift the moment that all of a sudden all these truckers that were not vaccinated, these were federal mandates. And by the way, I was a member of police on guard, Mounties, and both military and Mounties mandated that if they didn't get the job, they'd lose their jobs. So it wasn't just truckers that were affected. It was all federal employees that were affected. And we have a whole series of laws in our legal system to protect coercive medical interventions. We have informed consent. Caryma, I know you're tracking that. These laws were being the courts
typically deal with that.
And everybody. Yeah, but when we never got to that. We went to punitive measure at every turn across this country, right? But here's the issue. The federals mandated this kind of stuff. These were coming from the federal government, from Justin Trudeau's cabinet. They were pushing these things on everybody. So if you wonder why we had, retired Mounties or retired helping us out, it's because they were federal employees where this country was going. Like it or not.
Well, they also didn't want to get vaccinated or wear a mask.
This is not about COVID-19. Yeah. The mask is a
but you said it was
issue
when you went.
This medical intervention that they didn't want. What's that?
Yeah. But yeah, we get it. Caryma,
this is the reality of this situation. Today it's COVID, and we set the standard. It's going to be later. Sorry,
well, it's just so far in human history, in the history of this country, it's just FLQ and vaccines. That's pretty much it. But I wanted Caryma to weigh in on this because she's been chomping at the bit. I think is it champing or chomping? I think it's champing.
It is chomping, but I'm comfortably at the bit. We're fine. that is intact. But just, yeah, on the point of, you know, what was, I think, supposed to be a heartwarming anecdote about the kid who had a treatment, and so we paused the horns. Like, everyone has stuff that they do and deal with on a regular basis, right? And no one should have to beg for accommodations where those accommodations are the ability to exist peacefully in your city. So I don't find that particularly compelling. And there also, you know, doesn't seem to have been any transparency with how that worked, any process system. Like, I'm not one for bureaucracy, but how was anyone else supposed to access that? You know, students who had their exams coming up, or midterms or whatever. Can you guys just stop honking for a bit so I can finish my readings? Like, that's also important and valid. So it just, having been there and experienced it in sort of a, probably an in-between, what the two of you, experienced, it was not livable. Like, I had work still that I was doing. And I was fortunate to be able to work remotely. But even in my hearings, you know, I would get interrupted by the honking. And that was post-injunction as well. So it didn't actually resolve anything. And at the bottom line is, if we go back to what you were seeking to accomplish, right? Prompt this discussion and have collaborations, or you've provided a table of some sort for our democratically elected officials to speak at. But what's your standing? What's your authority on any of that? There is none. So people were there for all sorts of reasons, but I can't quite discern the goal. And it hasn't, you know, we're now 7 days into the inquiry. I still don't know. I spent 25 days there. I don't know. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I don't know.
You don't know what the eventual goal was on behalf of the people that went to Ottawa? Is that like you?
Yeah, I don't know. You were there? Right? I can pick out sort of individual sort of things that people were looking for, but overall, what led to this mass movement? I don't know. I don't know, and none of the explanations make sense to me. I think that undermines any sense of legitimacy, because we get false equivalencies comparing what happened in Ottawa to other protests. And you know, it's fair to draw analogies sometimes, and we can distinguish. But unlike most other protests that I'm aware of that of this magnitude, there are clear demands. Here, the demands were sedition. So, like, I don't know.
Paulie, you wanted to comment too, and then we'll go back to Tom. Go ahead.
The fact that you said you have empathy, I find very hard to believe. I find it very hard to believe, because you tell a story about how you shut down for a little bit so a child could get an exam done. But thousands of us, 20,000 of us, live in the core that was affected by this. Thousands of us were trying to work from home. My boss lives even closer to Wellington than I do, on a ground floor apartment where he was surrounded by diesel fumes and could not get any work done that entire time. He could go to the office, but it was no better because the office was right next to you guys. You have no empathy. Clearly you have no empathy, because if you did, you would have shut it down after the first weekend. You would have gotten the trucks out of the city and just paraded up and down Wellington and on the hill. But you didn't do that. You stayed. You stayed for weeks. And then you insisted, we're not leaving until we get what we want. That's not a protest. That's a demand. That's not a protest. Protesting is, we don't agree with what you're doing. Here's our voice. Here's what we're saying. But when you camp out in the city for 3+ weeks, when you wreak havoc on a neighborhood of mostly poor and working class, I'm working class, when you do that to innocent people who asked for none of this, who, by the way, we've all experienced thousands of protests. I've been living here for 39 years.
I hate all of them equally. I just want to throw that on the table.
That's fair.
I just hate all
Fair point.
protests. Or just let you
I
know.
see them all the time. No big deal. They go, they have their parade, they do their protest, whatever. But when you continue to go on day after day, night after night with DJs and fireworks and train horns, that is not a protest, sir. That is an illegal occupation of a G7 national capital. And none of that is acceptable. None of it.
Tom, when you listen to these, like when you listen to Tom, Paul, did you get a chance to talk to many people who like were as affected as Paul was, or anybody that comes from, like, have you had a chance to sit one-on-one with anybody yet? Because I think part of the talking, like you and I having a conversation, part of it is listening too, right? Like I really do try to come over and listen to you, and I try to find common ground and try to support you in your endeavors to live a happy life. And so through that and through our last conversation, Tom, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about prejudging people. I learned a lot about, where we miss each other in terms of ideology and not being able to talk to each other, who has empathy and who doesn't is a big one. It's a huge component of, when I decide that I'm going to be friends with certain people or I'm going to talk to individuals, whether or not that's worth our collective time and what we're all going to get out of it. And the people that I have on the show have tons of empathy. Paul's got lots of empathy. Caryma's got lots of empathy. I believe I was born with way too much because I'd love to be a way bigger asshole, which is hard to believe. I know. Because you'd be like, there's no room for you to become a bigger asshole, Dean. We already know you're a massive asshole. But like, I really do try to be a better person every day, which is why I wanted to have you on, because, and people that like me are going to say, fuck you. I like you as a person. I don't like what you guys did. I don't like the effect it had on people that I care about. I don't like the effect it had on certain individuals. I don't like what it did to our country. I don't like what it did to our borders, all that other stuff. But I also don't like how you were used by conservatives and by political opponents. And I don't like the words they put in your mouth either. But at the same time, again, we get back to the original nexus of what we're trying to do here. And that nexus is we're trying to listen, right? And so when you listen to guys like Paul, talk about his experience and you say you have empathy, is that part of the conversation, or do you really feel like have you started to kind of understand what some of these people went through? Because like I find that to be the biggest portion of this exercise, right? Is listening to each other.
Okay. Sorry, it just froze a little bit.
No problem.
Sorry. And I'm going to say this. Okay, am I back? Is it clear now? Because it froze for a second, but I'm.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Am I frozen?
All right. No,
right,
we can
hear
hear you.
A little bit choppy.
We can hear you.
Okay, so Paul, I'm going to say. Okay, I'm going to say, Paul. It was never one's intent ever to put the residents of Ottawa through this. Throughout the entire time, the goal was always to put pressure on the federal government. But after 2 years, we didn't have any other way. The convoy was one of the only mechanisms this country's ever seen from across the country, from Canadians that went from both coasts, went into Ottawa to try to get at least some level of government in this country to listen to the 6 million people that chose not to get vaccinated. Nobody ever had an intention to go there and to harm or disrupt specifically for the residents of Ottawa. And I can tell you, I can hand on my heart whatever you want. We worked hard with the city of Ottawa to relieve the pressure onto the citizens of the city and the police and the council. We tried our best to work with the police to get the change so that we could just get up onto Wellington, put the pressure on the federal government. That's what we tried to do. We worked really hard for that. And if you watch the inquiry, you're going to hear, if you haven't already, because it's already been said, that the Ottawa police and the local politicians can at the last minute, they kept pulling the carpet out from underneath the officers that we worked with every single day. I myself had meetings with the city manager to convey this exact message that, look, we know the pressure that Slawley's under from the local politicians. We know the pressure residents are under. We have no problem to consolidate all our vehicles, as many as we can, up onto Wellington to get away from the residents. This was a stated objective that we communicated as clear as we could to the city. But you know what? The police and the local politicians, they interfered and they screwed everything up from the get-go. They went from escorting the truckers, and by the way, AP and the Ottawa police were fully abreast of the entire.
Oh yeah, they had signs.
Day one,
they had signs on the 401 going this way, truckers. Like
showed up.
Yep.
They brought us into
here's the
city,
thing,
and then they started to screw us around. And who started screwing us around, and then it put the pressure on the cops in bad faith, and then this turned into a nightmare. Now, if you listen to the testimony this week about from the chief of intelligence for the OPP stories, they've all been the intelligence guy for the province of Ontario has said, yeah, all that stuff was an outright lie. He confirmed it on the stand.
What?
2 days
what?
ago.
That there weren't
so
ideologically motivated extremists involved?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. I heard that. That was the old school.
Conversation really. I mean, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm getting a bad connection. Sorry, but one of the things. Why is this inquiry happening? Why is this happening? The reason it's happening is, one, by legislation. If you invoke the Emergency Act under Section 63, hold a public inquiry. And this public inquiry has two stated objectives. One is to determine whether or not the federal invoking the Emergency Act. The other one is yes or no, doesn't matter. Yes or no, could we do to make change or make the legislation better in the future, right? And here's the reality. By use the Emergency Act, you can't use the Emergency Act unless you meet the four conditions of the CSIS Act. This is what this inquiry is all about. There's no condition that was meant under CSIS Act that gave the government of Canada the authorization to use something for Paul, because I think this is important for Paul to understand this from my point of view, okay? In this, and a lot of the law enforcement, not one time did they ever have an intention to come and talk, to work with us, to help. Just like they've, every other, on average, the city of Ottawa gets 99 protests per year. That's almost. And at no time did the government at the local level ever say, let's just go talk to these guys and see how we can work this out. What they did, they moved, give themselves nothing but extraordinary powers. From day one, they were angling to get that Emergency Act so they could go in and break the back of this convoy. Even what you saw in those videos, really probably an act of desperation on my part. And I will admit, I misspoke a little bit on what I was saying, but I was trying to convey the message of, come on, guys, we're here to talk to the government. And still, do they ever talk to the government? No. But veterans and citizens were beaten viciously and by other police forces. And if you don't believe it, go look up a guy named Chris Deering and all the veterans that got the shit kicked, zap strapped and driven out into the country and dropped off on the side of the road. These are Afghanistan war vets. Chris Deering is one you should look up. He was almost killed in Afghanistan. He was arrested and beaten by the Ottawa cops. So,
well, I can't confirm any of that, but I can tell you this is that I find it very interesting because Well, I know, but we've got like a whole bunch of different aspects to this that you know we can't confirm. Obviously, we can't confirm that. Obviously, I stand for our veterans. You and I have had that conversation many times before. Obviously, we have an extremist veteran issue in this country, and we saw a bunch of those cats show up. You know, and I'm not going to get into the other veteran stuff that you and I have been talking about, which we can't talk about one specific veteran. But I mean, you know, there's a huge component of veterans who didn't want to get vaccinated, hate the government. Easy to see why. You know, and so you know those examples, in as much as they are examples, are kind of, you know, they're out there. We can't confirm those examples, but what we can say is that, you know, we've all kind of watched what has happened, and we've kind of broken it down, and even just talking about it, it seems like you go back to the same thing, which is like, hey, but no one was listening. No one was listening to us. No one was talking to us. And by and large, I think generally speaking, I could be wrong, Tom, it's because like 100% of us were going through the same shit. And like 90% of us decided to just kind of get on with it, get our vaccine, and just understand that you can't be traipsing around the globe, inviting people in, sending people out who are full of infectious disease. Like, you know, and then we get down to the idea that COVID isn't as bad as you think it is. And a lot of other people there aren't wearing the face diapers and fuck vaccines and stuff like that. But dude, it's like, it's fucking still serious. Like I pulled some numbers today, right? This is the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases reported by PHAC by vaccination status as of September 25th, 2022. So this is about a month old. Majority of the cases are in the unvaccinated category. Hospitalizations, the vast majority are in the hospital, are in the unvaccinated category, and then deaths, of course, not even fucking close. Like this week, Tom, we set a record in Ontario from last May. 109 human beings died. 109. Yeah. In Ontario. That and how many just announced today. It's a widely available number.
How many doctors in this country? Yeah. How many doctors in this country?
How many doctors
died in the last 6 weeks?
I don't know, but I know that a lot of people will say that they know why they died, and like several died, right? And they'll blame it on COVID, like Jamie Saleh does, like every third day. Where she'll take Brian Marchman's death. He died of a heart attack, not vaccine related. And she'll say, hey, he died of COVID, and she has no idea. And inserting yourself into the process like that doesn't help anybody, because no one here is a fucking yeah, but we're not coroners. You know, like, you know, it's the idea that we can pimp out the death of doctors across the country and not have a cause of death, not get into the coroner's papers, and not decide exactly what the whole idea is. Again, I mean, you and I spoke about this last time. I don't have a coroner degree on the wall, nor do I have an infectious disease degree on the wall. So it's pointless for us to talk about efficacy, how people died, vaccine injuries, and all that stuff, because it's ridiculous. Like the whole idea that this sits in an arena where you just don't want to get vaccinated because you don't want to be part of the solution. That's what we all get back to all the time. And so it's easy for me to understand why, you know, nobody wanted to get vaccinated, because it's not the vaccines. It's just you don't trust anybody, right? Like it by and large, that was a group of people who just fucking don't trust anybody, hate the government. Well, guess what, Tom? We hate the government too. Everybody does. Like you're literally looking at three individuals outside of yourself who also cannot stand being governed by assholes. We get it. We totally understand it. But what you can't do is say that you're the only people that went through it. You can't. Like, it's just not a possibility, because everybody else is going through it. We've all dealt with it. I got my bivalent vax last week, the old Booski. Boom, boom, boom. Did I want to go in and do it? No. Did I like lockdowns? No. Nobody on this panel liked lockdowns. Nobody on this panel liked travel mandates. Everybody in this country wanted to live free. But we, by and large, understood exactly what needed to happen. And so we got on with the business of getting on. And I think where the disconnect is for me is when I look at the harm that was visited on human beings. Like, you know, someone said to me today, because we were talking about 109 dead people in the province of Ontario this week from COVID alone, while we're fucking running around, no masks, no vaccine. And how anybody cannot value human life at this point? That when we've watched it happen, 45,000 plus dead, more than in both world wars, how anybody can invest any time into the idea that being a good citizen is optional, or this is medical tyranny, is beyond me, right? Like it's beyond, generally speaking, anybody who watched what happened, because we were doing the same things. We didn't like the same things. yet only a certain group of people decided to go and hurt another group of people, right? Like, that's how I look at it. I get that you hate the government. We all do. All of us. I can't say, dude, when Justin Trudeau called the fucking pandemic election, I was finished with the guy. Done. Still am. Not interested in what he's got to sell. Zero. Absolutely not. He politicized it. So did Pierre. We don't have a liberal problem or a government. Everybody's got a fucking government problem. Everybody's got an elite problem. What we have is a political issue here, right? We've got a political issue where you're being used, we're being used, and we're being told to fight in the town square. That's what we're being told to do. So the idea of having you here is to say, we're not going to fight in the fucking town square anymore. We're going to try and understand where each other are coming from. And I still don't hear it. Like, I see us trying to communicate, but I still don't hear it. And I know that you said earlier, hey, listen, Paul, I'm sorry we tried, but I mean, fuck, cat's out of the bag. Like, I mean, you know, we all kind of went through it and we all kind of saw it. And in a perfect world, it would be fucking awesome if we all could sit down together, have a pint, talk about, you know, how your geodome's doing. You know, we could talk to Paul about his voice work. We can talk to Caryma about what it's like to take 400 milligrams of pot in a brownie and then write a dissertation that nobody else could write. Like, we would all sit around and shoot the shit and have some fun. But it's like the idea that we can't get past the ideologies, it's one thing, but it's the idea that we can't get past an objective reality that is totally fucking everybody over. You, me, Caryma, Paul, right? This isn't about what we want to be true. I hope they find no wrongdoing at the Emergency Act. Like, none, zero. I hope that they find that the police are fucking useless, because we already know that. And I hope they find out that, like, in a perfect world, you guys should have gotten a little something, something, and we could be more understanding. We could all come in the middle, fucking kumbaya. But it's not going to happen because no one has empathy for each other, right? I have empathy for everybody, unless they hurt another person, which is the reputational capital that the Convoy does not have in this country. No matter how many times people tweet, no matter how many times True North cuts a tiny little piece and says, oh, there were major injuries. There weren't. There was one. There was one serious injury, one recorded serious injury of anybody. And it was the lady who got hit by the horse. And she even admitted she was fine after that. But, you know, like, we're not talking about how to be better people here. We're trying to convince each other. Tom, you're never going to convince me. You're never going to convince Paul. You're never going to convince Caryma. And we're never going to convince you that we're right? We're just not going to do it because you're pot committed. I'm pot committed. We're all pot committed to our own narratives. But at the very least, we could say, hey, fuck, sorry, dude. Sorry, Paul. Sorry, Tom. Sorry, Caryma. Hey, sorry we didn't listen. But at the very same time, there's no understanding that I have where a group of people hurt another group of people, and you're just supposed to fucking be cool with it after or blame the government. Like, you know, everybody has the freedom choice, freedom of will, freedom to be able to act and do as they please.
I got to jump out here in a sec, guys, but I just want to say a couple of quick things before I do.
Yeah.
First off, I get called a cock liberal soy boy who advocates violence all the time because in my Twitter bio I say punch Nazis, and I have my pronouns in there, he, him, dude. So you want to call me that? Feel free. I don't give a shit. I'm not liberal. I don't belong to any political party. I never, ever will. But I vote in every election, and I voted for all parties in past elections. That's out of the way. Now, the second thing is that everybody seems to think, oh, you're just this spoiled soy boy. I'm allergic to soy, so fuck that, number one. And number two, I don't work for the federal government. I'm working class private sector. I was laid off at the beginning of the pandemic. I was home for 2 months with no income. When I got hired back, I was at a 20% reduction in salary and no vehicle allowance when I had to lease a new vehicle in January for my job. So I lost thousands upon thousands of dollars at the pandemic, and I'll never get it back because I'm in my mid-50s now. But here's the thing. I didn't shit on somebody's lawn. I didn't camp out in somebody's doorstep. I didn't blow a horn, and I didn't scream that I should talk to the Prime Minister because I got screwed over by the system. I bucked up, I pulled up my pants, I put on my boots, and I went to work. Because that's what fucking adults do. I got to go. I got to run to the office because I got a job I got to go take care of. It's great to see everybody. Tom, in another lifetime, in another world, we might actually be buddies. But right now, you got to learn that many of us were harmed by your actions. See ya.
There you go. That's Tom. Tom, there you go. Right there. You just laid it right on the table, right? Is it that it's not dissimilar to what you're going through? Everybody. We're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
That's what I find interesting.
I lost my job. I lost my job at the beginning of this too. I haven't had a job, and I cashed an RSP just so that I could afford the year. My Army pension is not substantial enough. I mean, I was never under any illusion that I could. You know, I'm 50 years old, and you know, I'm affected by this whole entire thing too. And here's my dilemma, and I wish I could before Paul left. Here's my dilemma. For every person like Paul, other people that were residents of in the downtown that actually supported us. And this is the hard part. This is really the difficult part, because we had the Horn injunction. Our lawyers went and got 100 affidavits from local affected area that were supporting. So, you know, if we're getting all this support, we're also getting people like Paul, where do we, you know, the issue, like, it's a mixed message. But what I will say, mixed message, I testify to the fact when it's my turn that we were doing the best that we could, reduce the impact on the residents of Ottawa. This was an objective that we had, and it was driven by the behavior, or not the residents, sorry, of the local politicians in some, not all the police, but some. Nobody went there to affect the lives of, but we, and this is, I think, the other side of the coin here, Dean, is that we, the 6 million of us, and let's look at the fact that on Tuesday, we raised over $10 million from Canadians. We had highways over from coast to coast supporting this convoy to come to Canada. So can we say that only a small group of people were affected by this and that we hated them, when all across this country, driving Ottawa, and I sent you the documentary, episode 2 of Trucking Freedom this morning, Dean, and it shows the support of the convoy God. So what is the message to the convoy? That everybody behind the highway from coast to coast supporting this convoy. So there's the message. And by the way, 27 convoys were inspired across the planet by the Ottawa convoy. That this is real stuff. This was every government in the world that came to did the same to their own citizens across the planet. Big issue. It's not just about COVID restrictions. It's about the government's willingness to give themselves extraordinary powers and to abuse their authority and to actually go after their citizens. They're not officials meant to represent, and they didn't represent. They locked people down, and you know, they mandated all these things at every level of, and even the local governments, they all decided that they were going to impose these ridiculous fines and arrest people. And for what? What authority do they have? I mean, public health. Did it because
but what authority did
public health?
Justin Trudeau goes to the mayors, goes.
Go ahead, Caryma.
Yeah.
Their authority,
not elected.
Their authority is them being elected, official. Right? Yeah, but the reason that they would take advice from public health, who are not elected officials, because they have a level of expertise, right? So we rely on other people having developed expertise and then take their opinions and then formulate policy based on those recommendations, right? Like, that's just how it works in a society. So you're acting confused that, well, we have Paul who's upset, but we had other people who weren't upset. So I don't know what to think. But okay, maybe if we were to tally all of those opinions and then see which one has more, sort of like in a democracy, I think that the balance would not be favorable to the convoy. But even if it was, even if it was, we live in a society where you have to balance the rights against sort of the infringements that you exercising your rights may have on others. So it's not a straight calculus. So I think by like any way that you slice it, there was actual tangible harm caused, and whether that was the intention or not is sort of beside the point, because we focus on the impact, right? So I think that some of this is a bit disingenuous, because we're laying it out now, and the testimony is what it is. I wasn't invited. I would have things to say as well. But I think we can agree that there was actual harm caused, and whether you were being used as pawns by the Conservative or jerked around by local politicians or police, the fact is that your group was weaponized against another faction of society because of the actions and activities that were taking place. So is that justifiable? I don't think so. Will the Emergencies Act be held to be an overreach? I think it's possible. I think that there was probably an overstatement of harm in certain respects. And I'm not, military or police intelligence, so I'm not privy to what it is that they have, and that's hopefully what comes out of this act. But could the trucks stay on Wellington indefinitely? No. Does it make sense that we were going to move them from residential areas to clog up Wellington even farther? Like, what would that mean for the narrow little emergency lane? Are you just taking up more of Wellington? And what entitles you to do that? The answer is nothing, because everyone has endured the pandemic and the past 2 years and the lockdowns. So you're coming from a position of sort of singularity, but you're not unique in your experiences. But this convoy that supposedly has inspired others, this is a repeat of tactics that we've seen as recently as 2019 in Canada. And, Canada's not the first to have had convoys of this nature. So it's not a unique tactic or approach, but it was, I think, standalone as far as the damage that it caused.
Yeah. Fascinating. I mean, you could, it's about parsing and it's about trying to figure it out. But what Caryma's doing is trying to meet everybody halfway in that statement, right, Tom? It's like, yeah, we get it. But I mean, the impinging, if you get down to human rights and the rights of each individual person, it's a hard argument for anybody to make, and specifically that only a certain group of people should be exempt from something that the rest of the people are trying to understand, trying to use, trying to help each other, trying to help their parents, trying to help the marginalized. So, it's interesting. But when it comes to the EA hearing, when do you get to take the stand? When are you going to be a rock star? And do you have enough gel? Do you have enough gel for that?
Well,
do you need a suit?
There's a I'll wear a suit. I will wear a suit for it. There was a list out there in the media, and I think that's the order is. So probably I would think first week of November.
Yeah.
We'll get up on the stand and we'll tell our part. And I was actually looking at some of the comments. Someone thought I had the comments turned off, but yet again, Dean, I got a lot of people on there that apparently don't like me.
Well, the convoy.
Right? I mean, I knew what I was getting into.
Yeah,
I knew what I was getting into.
I got lots of people that don't like me too, dude.
Unpopularity is not like a badge of honor. This is a fairly normal comment section, so I don't know that it's a badge of honor. People don't like you because I think you've come across as not being honest and quite disingenuous. That's my read of the comments.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
You're allowed to have an opinion, and I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. But Caryma, the first time I ever saw you.
Sorry, I made that awkward. Sorry, Dean.
You showed up at you actually showed up at a grand reopening of a restaurant where there was political speeches for two different political parties, both young and blue, wearing a hazmat suit, goggles, to intentionally disrupt and provoke a response. You pull these stunts. This is
first of all, I was invited to attend in costume.
Good thing.
Roy and Nicole invited me to come in a costume. I didn't have a burger suit, so I had a hazmat suit. I did the best I could, right? So that's number one. And number two is I actually stayed mostly across the street. So I have footage of you speaking and who was it? The Ontario First person. I don't remember. They were boring too. But I have some footage of that. But I was not disruptive. I wasn't trying to force my way onto the stage. I wasn't there with a megaphone making noise while you guys were speaking. I didn't act like a convoy, right? I was just there unobtrusive. And people came up to me. I took a few photos. That's it. So the fact that you would single that out as an agitation of some sort.
No, it's just the first time I ever heard of you.
Between that,
you showed up to agitate.
Oh, she didn't agitate. She just showed up in a hazmat suit and a costume because she was asked to, and Roy and Nicole from Peterburger said that they'd pay her for it. So she was playing along. So she showed up in a hazmat suit. And record, she's got a gift certificate from Roy and Nicole, and they shut down, so no one can use a gift certificate anymore. It's a real bummer. Not like I would have eaten 4 burgers, but whatever.
So you think I was agitating there? Does that mean that you all were agitators? Was the convoy an agitation on a mass scale with thousands of people, as opposed to one lonely little loser in a hazmat suit? Like,
easy.
It's a good question. It's a fair question. I think we were there to definitely make a public statement to get the government of Canada to have a talk with us. Because 2 years, people across this country protested everywhere. And listen, what it boils down to, like I've been trying to say, and I know I don't got a great internet connection here, but what I've been trying to say is COVID-19 is the central issue of what's going on. The central issue always was, how far was the government of Canada and the province willing to go to suspend charter rights? And we saw that. And that's a big thing that happened. I mean, even informed consent is a low criminal code infraction. Seem to stop any of the government laws from going after people or the employers, or setting the conditions how employees having to go to a restaurant, lose my private medical information to a waiter or a waitress in a restaurant. I mean, these laws existed to protect the government from the public from the government that overreaches. So why is this such a hard thing for other people to understand? Is we were going there to up charter rights upheld, and this is the problem that, you know, maybe this is not something we talk about. A little bit too much about COVID, but we don't talk that this time today, COVID was the restrictions that we were upset about. But what about when you guys are pissed off at something? Are you going to look back and say, well, I'm never going to go and protest with a truck? And by the way, you can't now in Ontario because of Bill 100. Here's the issue: 6 million people.
You guys are restricting our freedoms and trying to fight
allow
for them,
their bodily
basically.
autonomy. Oh, come on, Caryma. Like, I'm doing the best.
No, that's exactly what it is. I went to Canada Day, and I've never seen a Canada Day that was as heavily militarized, and that was a direct result of the convoy, the occupation, whatever. So when you go about things in a way that isn't thoughtful, the end result is counterproductive, and it harms everyone. That's my observation of what happened in Ottawa. You guys had a lot of rope to hang yourselves with, you know, trying to hang Trudeau with the rope, but instead we're all screwed and less free as a society as a result. That's what it is.
Yeah, when you look at what happened in Ottawa, specifically on Canada Day this year, it was a military zone. It was policed to the tits. People couldn't come and go as they pleased in years past, obviously, and that's a great point. You know, when you're fighting for the freedom of a certain group and it impinges the freedom of other people, who wins, right? Like, where is that? Where is it that in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms it said, okay, you know, if your freedoms are impinged upon, you get to go and impinge upon the freedoms of several other people, because it's just a freedom impingement off. Like it just never ends. It's a never ending thing. And what happens is institutions then say, okay, well, listen, we're not going to fuck around again because we look bad. There's a reputational aspect to this, and they clamp down on everybody. Everybody has to eat the shit. And that's what Caryma is saying, is that, you know, generally speaking, these things work in the negative for everybody, including the people, not just that partook in this, but it also is a negative for the people that just want to go out and fucking get wasted on Parliament Hill on Canada Day. I mean, you know, they just couldn't. We saw it. And I wonder too, if part of that, Tom, like, did you want those pictures? Like, did you guys was part of this to get a great photo op of like some violence, or like having the army flying down the 401? Is that kind of what was that part of this too? Were you guys looking for great opportunities to be able to kind of paint the government to look like an authoritarian government? Because in your mind, they are, obviously.
No. If you listen to the testimony that we've heard so far, chief for the RCO, his one of his other testified today and yesterday, there was no acts of violence that was warranted in any way. Like, we did not bring any violence to Ottawa. I gave a public statement where I said, look, there's no mission here for the military. They're not going to come here. And I gave that to try to calm the members that thought the government was going to send in the military to attack. And I said, therefore, the military. We didn't want military here. We didn't want the police here. We just wanted them to sit down and talk. And if they would have talked to us on day one, that I think things drastically different. I think we would have been able to get people Wellington out of those areas. I think there would have been a full outcome, because twice what we knew was that Trudeau sent envoys to other protests. So why did he not send an envoy out to talk to us, even have a minor conversation? What he did is Howard. Then he said he had COVID. He came up with, to hear from him, he's saying, I've invoked the Emergency Act because you have misogynist, racist, unacceptable view. He beat his own citizens using his law enforcement day after he revoked.
No, he didn't beat anybody, dude. He didn't beat anybody.
He revoked the Emergency Act. You want to see the video? Just look it up on YouTube. I can tell you right now, he beat a lot of people, and I'll get Chris Deering to.
He didn't beat anybody. He didn't beat a single individual.
I'll get Chris
anybody who was okay. Perfect. Because like I can tell you that Justin Trudeau didn't beat a single person.
He sent his police.
Oh, he did himself? You think he sent like goons to go beat guys up? You think he sent the police? They don't listen to him, dude. That's why I had to use the Emergency Act. Like,
listen to the testimony.
Listened to it for the past like 7 days, where they're like, the cops are like, we didn't do shit on both levels of policing, and then all of a sudden, Justin Trudeau's like, what the fuck? And then and same with Mayor Watson, and then all of a sudden, Doug Ford's missing in action for 3 weeks, and he's like, I don't want to get involved because I don't want any political stink on me. And they're like, too bad, you fucking loser. You got to get involved because you're the only person that can engage the Emergency Act before we make it a federal thing, and so that's why they had to do it. Like, that's. Dude, it's right there. Like everything that we have seen so far, in talking about not having violent people there, like in the OPP said this was no big deal. Dude, this is from the OPP Situational Awareness Bulletin, Freedom Convoy 2022, where they actually laid out exactly what the issues were, exactly what the current situation is, exactly the idea that there were IMVEs that were heading into the city, that were going to be involvement from ideologically motivated extremists who maintain strong anti-government views. Like, you didn't just come there with yourself because you didn't like what was happening in this country. you brought all the fucking Lugans, right? And the fact that the police are incompetent worked in your favor. This is what I'm seeing. The fact that the OPP are less than truthful about it works in your favor. And the idea that this was just a get together with people who hated the government and wanted to affect change for everybody, when the rest of the country doesn't agree with you, it just is disingenuous. It's in which Caryma is 100% right about. The idea that you were there for us when we said we're good.
Agree with us.
Yeah, they do. Almost all of them.
Rest of the country does not.
I read an article in the Tyee the other day, and the article in the Tyee said that effectively 13% of this country had 13% had a and this is a biological example. 13%. Oh, you like it, do you? 13% of people in this country viewed what happened favorably. 13%. So you're down to like 87. 87% of the country's like, that was fucked. What happened there? We're good. We understood it.
I saw a different poll that said 54.
Okay, well, let's do a poll right now, right here, and I'm willing to bet that it's 66 that are anti-convoy.
Oh, on Dean's platform. That would be like me doing it on mine. Yeah,
that is true, Tom. That is true. You'd get a very skewed result. But listen, I'm going to let you go. Yeah. We can bat this around all day, but at the very least, you got a chance to get some FaceTime with Paulie. I give you credit for sticking around for this too. Some of that stuff was pretty intense, and I know that you know what happens in our comment section. But best of luck to you in your version of the hearing and whatever you think comes out of this. I think it's been a fascinating thing, and I appreciate you taking time to go. See what?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dean, for having me.
He wants to go through the comments later. I think they'll be up on YouTube.
You'll be able to see them on YouTube.
I'm actually using you, Dean. I'm using you guys as practice for my cross-examination from all the other lawyers.
Well, good luck with that.
I hope you don't. By the way, you might want to tell the freedom lawyer, this guy, he's got to change the coat. Like he's wearing the same coat in every single thing.
I got a message from Brendan. Dean.
Yeah, what'd he say?
Dean, he said he'll come on your show.
Will he really? I'm happy to have him on because he's been fucking hilarious.
Brendan wants on your show.
Yeah, happy to have Brendan on. He's been absolutely hilarious. Like the French thing with Matthew Fleury. Did you see that yesterday? It was the best. Oh, yeah. I loved it. Yeah. He's like, "You want to speak some French?" He's like, "No, I can speak English. We're all good."
I asked him.
But listen, Tom, best of luck. Yeah, happy to have Brendan on anytime. Best of luck to you. Yeah. Let's stay in touch, and we'll talk to you soon. Really appreciate you being here, Tom. All right, man. Take care. There's Tom Marrazo, one of the organizers of the convoy, in a spirited conversation with Caryma Saad, who laid it out, by the way.
I think it was pretty gentle.
And I came in hot there at the end.
Well, it's just... it's weird watching history being rewritten despite all of the documentary evidence that exists. So, Pierre Poilievre is walking it back. I had nothing to do with any sort of power brokerage. What? Bro, what? And then, yeah, I showed up in a hazmat suit. But that, if you're going to, we can even agree that that's agitating. Okay.
Not really. It's not really agitating. No.
But then you ran a convoy. So actually, I guess the convoy was technically first.
Yeah, and if you believe Tommy, he's like, I got roped into this at the last second. I wasn't involved with the MOU, and I'm like, I would say the same thing, Tommy.
So yeah, hopefully that does help with the cross-examination. But
and you know what? I said the same thing, and I hope it came out. You're always guilty by association no matter what you do, right? But my theory is this. If 60 Minutes can interview Charles Manson, there's no reason why we can't interview Tom Marrazo. I want to have him
Walters, on. Saddam Hussein. This is he's our Saddam.
Right. Well,
Tom Marrazo,
I don't know. It's a little heavy, but
less charismatic.
But a lot of hate every time I'm like, Tom's going to be on the show. Everybody goes, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I got notes from friends today. Paul doesn't, you saw Paul get incredibly animated, which I loved, by the way, because I wanted those two to face off because every time, well, not every time, last time we had Tom on, Paul was like fuck that guy, fuck him all the way to this, and he can do this to my thing. And I'm like, well, I'll just kind of put you in front of him and see what happens. And I love doing that. But I got to tell you, I mean, I feel for the guy as a human being. I got absolutely nothing life-changing out of that, other than no one's empathetic. They're still driving at the same things, and the same things have a multitude of topics, right? Like if it's not mandates, it's this. No one talked to us about that. But it kind of comes back around to the whole idea that we got beef. Like we just got beef, and we're going to take that beef to the streets. And when you say, well, listen, what about everybody else that went through it? It's almost like deer in the headlights from anybody, where it's like, well, yeah, but we were fighting for you. And then when you take that bullet out of the gun and you go, no, I was good. Like, I'm fine. They're like, no, you aren't. And then you're like, well, what about the law? And they're like, well, is my freedoms. And then you made the point that, you know, you're protecting your freedoms by doing this. You're impinging on the freedoms of other individuals. Like, you can't do that. Canada's not made like that. But then it's like, almost like a record scratch, reset, and back to the beginning to cycle through the same things, right? Which is why it was really important.
There's 5 talking points. There's a total of 5 talking points, I feel. And, you know, they come out and then we start over again.
Yeah. Fascinating. Anyway, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right. Talk to you soon. Caryma Saad, ladies and gentlemen, at Caryma Saad. Or sorry, at Caryma Rules. Yeah, a little peace sign. And you can also get her at her website, sadvocacy.com. If you're looking for it. Listen, she's a landlord, tenant lawyer. She's a gonzo journalist. I'm pretty sure she invents mRNA vaccines in her spare time. She does a little bit of everything. Great to see you.
Bye, guys.
All right. Talk to you soon. Wow, that was wild. And no one's perfect, right? And, you know, like you could sit here and blame everything on conservatives, everything on the unvaccinated. You can't. This government isn't without warts at all. And where I see it the most, what they're trying to do to you, the federal government, what they're trying to do to you with a Twitter account, with an Instagram account, and not only what they're trying to do to you, but what they're trying to take from you and to give to mainstream media in this country. It's hilarious. And joining us to talk about it, a friend of mine. He is a professor. His name is Dr. Michael Geist. Do you get tired of me calling you doctor? I feel like it carries more weight and people will listen if I just include Dr. Geist.
Well, my mom feels the same way. So if she uses it, you can too, I guess. I think you're about the only two, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, I like to scare people with it. Like when we're going to talk about internet law, we're talking about, the freedom of speech, Bill C-11, the algorithmic changes. We're talking about them trying to replace the federal government, the Trudeau government trying to replace, the Broadcast Standards Act. We've got a couple of bills they're trying to hustle through. And I feel like it gets a better explanation and people will be like, ooh, I got to listen. Like if I just said it's Michael Geist, professor, internet law expert, great. But if I said Dr. Michael Geist, everybody's like, okay, this is the definitive shit. Let's listen.
All right. I got to try that with my kids. Maybe they'll start listening. Okay.
Guys, I'm a doctor. And they're like, that's different, Dad. That's different.
No,
How are you?
Great to see you. The problem in my house is my wife actually is a family doctor.
Oh, is she?
So she's not such a fan of me using the doctor title. You know, there's one doctor in this house, and it ain't me. Anyway.
Well, did they see? That's now I get it. Now you've put yourself in your place where you're like, listen, I could go around with doctor. I could put it on a credit card, put it on my scene card, but there's a real doctor in the house.
For sure.
That's incredible. Good for you. How are you? Great to see you.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you all, as always. We tried to get you on yesterday. I booted it. But there's some shenanigans. And then, listen, we've been talking a little bit about it. And in these culture wars that we get into, it's so easy to go, it's the conservatives' fault. It's all them. It's all this. It's all that. And it's so easy to not advocate against Bill C-11 and C-18 because the conservatives are advocating against Bill C-11 and C-18, and everybody's got their reasons for it. But if you can kind of bring us up to speed, if you don't follow Michael, please do. His Twitter handle is at Michael Geist, or at mgeist, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And you can go to michaelgeist.ca for the latest. But you've not only been consulting, you've been taking part in the hearings. And these are two pretty big bills. Can you just give us a quick recap of C-11, C-18, and then we'll get into what they just did this week to prevent you from getting any more information or having your voice heard, that'd be great.
Yeah, we sure can. There's been a lot happening, even just in the last few minutes, actually, on C18 involving Facebook. So we'll come to that in a sec. With respect to C11, though, that's a bill I think that if there is a bill that people have been paying attention to, that's typically the one. It's the one that started life as a broadcasting reform bill to try to bring services like Netflix and Disney into the Canadian system. Along the way, the government expanded it to effectively cover everything from TikTok videos to stuff people might throw up on YouTube. And so the concern suddenly was that we weren't just talking about big curated streaming services. We were talking about thousands of digital first creators, talking about podcasters like yourself, talking about just so many Canadians who use these platforms for a myriad of different purposes. That bill has now passed the House of Commons. It's being studied in the Senate. I think it's fair to say the Senate is giving it the kind of review that the House didn't want to give it. The government just kind of tried to push it through. In the Senate, they've been hearing from just a really wide range of people, and it's pretty apparent that the concerns are legit. I mean, there are very few people at this stage who seek to deny it in the way that the Canadian Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez has. The only really remaining question on that bill, though, is whether or not the Senate will make some changes, and if they do, what happens? What does the government do? It would go back to the House of Commons. Would they accept those changes? Would they say, no, we're not so interested. We liked what we did the first time. Nobody knows for sure, but it's a bill that I think has continued to attract attention. Quickly, Bill C-18 is a bill that has not attracted much of attention. It's a bill that ostensibly designed to force companies
on
like
purpose.
Google and Facebook. Yes, 100% on purpose. It has been below the radar screen. The Minister Rodriguez spoke literally for the first time in a parliamentary setting about the bill this afternoon. And it's a bill that is designed to force Google and Facebook to pay for news, or pays news organizations, I think is probably a better way to put it, because they already have agreements with many news organizations, and they don't really make use of that news beyond people sometimes posting either clips or links and referring traffic back to those sites. And yet what this bill is designed to do is essentially say, Google and Facebook, because you are linking back to those sites, you have to pay those sites for doing that linking. And it's pretty counterintuitive for anyone who knows anything about how things work in that online world. Usually it's the reverse. That's what the government has in mind, and we can get into this. And along the way, they are trying to shut down hearings about the bill. They are excluding a wide range of experts, of companies that so that they won't even get a chance to put their perspective forward. So much so that about minutes ago, Facebook, which is one of the companies being excluded. I mean, imagine being expected to pay hundreds of millions of dollars coming out of the law, and the government blocking you from even saying anything before committee studying this law. Facebook's put forward a release saying, here's our concerns. Oh, and by the way, if it passes in the way that it does, we're going to have to take a look and consider whether or not we can continue to allow for the sharing of news content in Canada.
Holy shit, that just happened?
That just happened.
Like this afternoon, like that was what you're referring to in terms of like breaking news in the last several minutes, is that Facebook. So let me just get this straight, and we'll get back to C11 in just a second. Folks, it doesn't matter who you are. Pay attention to this because it's very, very important, because it has to do with the freedom of speech and you not actually being allowed to post things and other people making money off your back, and the minting of certain institutions as de facto news that take that vacuum and suck in all the money. So let's just get back to that thing. So what you're saying is these hearings where Facebook, Google, other tech companies would pay Toronto Star, Rogers, Bell, CTV, etc., would pay for the right to share the news that they create that other people upload, not them, that other people will upload to their service, including Bell, Rogers, that upload to their Facebook accounts. They're getting now paid for that. That's what C-18 is all about. It's this massive cash grab / subsidy. So in the place of Facebook, where that example rings true, and what I find fucking fascinating, pardon my language, what I find fascinating is that they've excluded Facebook from speaking in a public seminar setting or a fact-finding public setting when it comes to putting this into law, but they're being targeted and will have to give hundreds of millions of dollars to the Canadian government. But the Canadian government effectively shut down Trudeau's government and Pablo Rodriguez, the heritage minister shut down any conversations and said, hey, you're not part of this. We're just going to ding you. Is that correct?
It's close. The money would not go directly to the government. The money would go, as it turns out, to some of the largest, most profitable companies in Canada, along with the CBC. Government has generally said, and this is sort of just aside, but it's important, the government had started by saying this is all about small media companies. We want to help the independents. It turns out that they've got a threshold so that many of those companies would be excluded. And in fact, when he was asked about that today, the heritage minister was pretty inconsistent. He started by saying, well, many of those small media companies aren't really interested in this bill anyway. They're interested in some of our other programs. But at the same time, he says this is incredibly important for those small businesses. The problem that he's facing is that the parliamentary budget officer reviewed the legislation and came to the conclusion that a little over 3/4 of the money, about $250 million a year, would go to broadcasters in the CBC, would go to Bell, to Rogers, to Shaw, to Chorus, to some of the most profitable companies in the country, along with the public broadcaster. They're the ones that take the lion's share of the money. Everyone else is left going for scraps. Meanwhile, they has, as you suggested, they're holding these hearings, this review to consider the legislation. How could it be amended or changed and the like? And after only 4 hearings today, with a stunning set of remarks from the head of the CRTC and the heritage minister. That was
what did he say? What did Ian Scott? What did he say? Because I can't stand that prick.
Oh my God! All right, yeah. Well, now, this you would really like. He was asked about the independence of the Broadcast Participation Fund. They actually got into questions around funding for Laith Marouf, this anti-Semite that had received government funding and had received support from the CRTC as well. And some of that money had come from what is supposed to be an independent entity, the Broadcast Participation Fund. And Scott is asked about, well, what role does the CRTC have here? And bear in mind, this is independent. I mean, the whole goal is that the CRTC doesn't influence. And he turns around and says, well, we have ways to influence it. Hint, hint. And he even says, it was honestly, it was like Goodfellas. And he's quite literally framing it as, maybe I shouldn't say this, but we have ways to influence them.
Come on. He said that out loud in a public setting in a hearing.
Like I tweeted out the video actually a little while ago, and yeah,
oh my God, I didn't know that. I'm going to share it.
Literally said that. So Scott was something. Pablo, I think, came across as not really understanding his bill, and I don't think being Rodriguez and being very credible, quite frankly, on the Laith Marouf stuff. He claimed that he didn't know anything about this, even though his department was alerted to it, as was the Prime Minister's office, for a month. And he said, no, I only read about it in the paper. I didn't know anything about it until that happened. I frankly don't think that's a very credible position to take. But, in the aftermath of having excluded so many experts, Facebook, like I said, or Meta took the position just in the last hour, about 45 minutes ago, putting out a post saying, here's our concerns. We weren't invited. We wanted to be invited and give our views. There's many others that we think you should have heard from as well. And here's the money quote that I can read for if you want. Faced with adverse legislation that's based on false assumptions that defy the logic of how Facebook works, we feel it is important to be transparent about the possibility that we may be forced to consider whether we continue to allow the sharing of news content in Canada. And so they've made it clear that, you go ahead, and it's not, some will say that this is just big tech threatening the government, but it seems to me it was the government that started threatening big tech in this circumstance and then literally excluded them from participating.
Yeah, change the rules. We're going to change the rules, and we're going to do a public consultation. By the way, you're not invited. And by the way, you're going to have to pay for all of it. And by the way, we're going to give all that money to people that use your services. Google did, or it's not to Google, Facebook did something similar in Australia, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of years ago, where they're like, yeah, fuck it, no more news. You're not going to be posting news. And it shook people. But they backed up real quick. Do you see that happening here too? Because I love the move, and Facebook's easy to vilify, are they not? It's easy for us to go, oh, it's Facebook, fuck them, they make billions, doesn't even matter. But if you want to if you want to fight in the court of public opinion, the government, Facebook. I like the move from Facebook. I hate the move from the government, but Facebook hasn't created many friends over the years either.
No, it's one of the things that makes this whole issue really tough is that it's really tough to be seen to be supporting Facebook in any way, quite frankly.
Right.
I mean, just nobody's keen to do so, and I think with good reason. But I think we also ought to recognize in this case that this was a clown show in terms of the way they held these reviews, and excluding so many notable voices. And it's not just the Facebooks. It was many independent media organizations that have been excluded. It's many experts, frankly, people who are both supportive or critical. My issue isn't whether, I just want to line up a bunch of critics here. My issue is that on an issue this important, you have basically 3 hearings with external witnesses. You exclude some of the core fundamental witnesses. And today you had MP saying, I think we ought to move directly to clause by clause. As I noted in a post on this morning, there's a committee that has held 10 hearings on science at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And so you can do 10 hearings on science in the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and you can only do 3 on a piece of legislation that has a profound implications for the media in Canada.
What are they hiding? Like, when any policies get introduced, new bills get introduced, they'll tell you why, right? Like publicly facing comments from the people that sponsor these bills. They'll be like, here's why we're doing it. And it always has this sunny disposition, this idea that this is going to help you. But I don't see anything in Bill C-18, which mints certain broadcasters and absolutely hoses everybody else. That forces big tech to pay. No love lost with big tech. They got lots of money. I don't care. But when you look at Bill C-11, it's almost like it dovetails into the reasoning, right? Like what are they up to? What are they trying to do, trying to accomplish? If you, through your infinite wisdom and your education and being who you are, staying on top of these hearings, staying on top of the evolution of both of these bills, C-10 actually came before C-11. That died prior to the actual COVID election, which was hilarious, made me laugh. But like, what do you see in terms of, the reasoning behind trying to do this in secret, cut off debate, not hearing from individuals? How do these 2 bills work together? And what is the underhanded reasoning if you were to be able to say, listen, from my perspective as a professional, someone who's educated, someone who writes books in this area, as a doctor, an academic doctor, and someone who's super tagged into this, what do you see as, the real reasoning behind trying to kettle free speech with C-11, harm people with algorithmic changes with C-11, and then, of course, C-18, which is a big cash grab? Like, what do you see? How does this kind of through confluence come together? And what's the picture that you would paint to people who we're talking to who are like, fuck, you guys are boring, C-11, C-18, whatever? Like, what is the damage that could come from this in both of these bills that they're hoping to exact on people? And who are they trying to help with this legislation?
Wow, there's a lot there.
I know. I ask long questions, Mike.
No, and there, but you cut right to the chase in terms of what the issues are. But I think there's a lot to unpack. I'll say a few things. I think first, who are they trying to help? In this instance, depends on the bill. When it comes to the C-11 bill, I think this is largely, I think at this stage, it's acknowledged it's being driven by a few lobby groups in Quebec. Who see this as advantageous. I mean, that's frankly, especially with the user content stuff, they're really the only ones left pushing it for this particular aspect of the provision. In terms of the C-18 bill, I mean, take a look where the money's going. It's going to Bell, it's going to Rogers, it's going to CBC. Those are the ones, plus a couple of the larger big media companies, Torstar and Postmedia. So, what are they trying to achieve? They're trying to get money to those companies. They may believe that it could help result in better coverage, or they may think that there's a legit problem, and they want to help those companies, even though these, as I say, are quite literally the richest media companies that we have in Canada right now. More relevant to individuals, because some people say, well, whatever, what, Bell always wins, it seems, and so they're going to win yet again. More relevant, I think, though, is what are the implications for everyday Canadians? And you asked that as well. And I think in the context of C-11, the implications are that, when people post to TikTok or to YouTube or a range of different things, that today is their expression. Right. I mean, often that's how we speak. That's how we communicate. That's how we engage. And if the government is going to insert itself into this with the prospect of regulation by a regulator who today quite literally said that even where there's supposed to be independence, there are ways for that regulator to intervene. I think that represents a significant risk to freedom of expression. And on C18, if we are going to take the position that merely linking to content, because that's all we're really talking about here in this context, is just links to the content. These sites do not publish the full amount of the content. Where they do, they typically get licenses for that. So it's merely about linking. If we suddenly say that people need to pay to be linked to, that I think puts the free flow of information online truly at risk, because we all depend on links for information. And by suddenly saying, well, these group of companies, they deserve to get paid where there are links, there's nothing to stop lots of other people from popping up and saying, well, hey, I got a website, or hey, I got content that people want to see, and you're linking to it. I ought to be paid as well. And suddenly I think you create some really serious risks to that free flow of information, much less the emergence. We do depend on a robust independent media in Canada. And this, I think, actually, ironically enough, puts it at risk. It excludes the smallest startups that really are probably in many ways the future, that will fill the void where some of the legacy companies can't keep up. And it forces even companies that don't want this. They want to be able to compete in the marketplace from doing so, because if you're a digital news startup in a small community, your number one competitor is the CBC typically. And so you look at the environment and say, I'm already competing with tax dollars. Now I got to compete with Google and Facebook money as well that the CBC is going to take. I have to jump into this. I've got to start taking the cash too, because there's no way I can compete otherwise. And so huge distortions in the marketplace, in a market that I think we depend upon to be independent and to hold, government and others to account.
Yeah, and I look at it from a perspective of compromise as well, Michael, is that, you're compromised the second you take money from somebody, right? Like, we know that in business, is that if someone pays you for something, like let's say we've got a couple of clients, one we're doing some messaging work for, because we do some third-party stuff too, where it's like, hey, listen, we want you to help us rehabilitate an image, a digital image of what we're doing and where we are, and we want to be there. And I'm like, great. That's awesome. And they're like, we want to come on your show now. I'm like, well, I can't really, because I'm kind of compromised to that regard where, this is good. We're going to do this for you. We're going to put this information out for you because this is the message you want people to know. But I have no way of actually being able to attest to the fact that this is, what you guys do, who you are, all those things. It's just an engagement play. It's user acquisition, driving people to them. Right. And so we have to take ourselves out of that equation and say, okay, listen, we're always going to be biased because we're doing work for these people. So in the big scheme of things, and I see it all the time in blazing narratives from people, and I go back to the, Loblaws the other day. This is another great example, right? Is where Galen Weston Jr. is like, guys, guess what? We're going to help you with the grocery bills. We're going to freeze prices on the no-name brand. Well, there's like an industry-wide price freeze in the exact same time frame that came from him. But Bell, who's compromised because they take money from No Frills and the Loblaws group of companies, they're like, what a great guy he is. Here's a full page spread. Here's a couple of commercials. Here's some news stories. And that's how this works. And so when I look at the government giving these people all kinds of free money to pad their bottom line, somewhere in the neighborhood of a 58% increase if you take in the money that they might be getting from tech and the money that they're getting in subsidies, 50% increase in your bottom line for doing nothing. I'm like, that's not biting the hand that feeds. We need to keep that hose of dough coming, right? Like, we got to keep that. So to me, it's just this idea that the Trudeau government, because this is how I look at it, because I'm very paranoid, but I look at it and I'm like, well, how can we believe anything any of those outlets write in terms of, being accountable, freedom of the press, being, people that take our government officials to task? You can't. Like, I can't find a way from like, let's figure out who's at fault here, who's at play. Even just in these bills, they get no representation of the things that you're talking about. And you have no skin in the game politically or financially. Like, you're the only person talking about it, which is why it excites me, because I'm like, hey, fuck, let's get Michael on to talk about it so we can inform people that the compromise involved with the money as it's exchanging hands and who's doing what for who is beyond me. Like, I don't understand how everybody isn't going, well, fuck, we can't believe any of these people already because of the subsidies that they get, and they lobby the shit out of the government to get more. And how are we going to believe any of the narratives that they put across to people on their platforms if indeed they want to keep this money coming in.
Listen, I think that there's a certain irony where the government says they're doing this to try to enhance the public's confidence in the media, and yet it has, I think, a direct impact of doing the opposite. It undermines it. I'll tell you candidly, I had a conversation yesterday with a senior reporter, columnist at one of the major media outlets, who acknowledged that person had not written about this bill and said, listen, it's just not something that up until this time I've really wanted to have the internal battles over whether or not we can cover it, because it was likely that the coverage was going to be critical of that legislation. And that's not the standard position that the papers are taking. And so when you have that blurring of business and editorial, where suddenly the business goals of these large media companies starts influencing the editorial, that is where you end up with the lost confidence in an independent media, where you start questioning, can I really trust what I'm reading, or why am I not even reading any of this stuff? It's not in the papers, and there's a reason for that. And I think that the government, through its legislation, has really sparked a lot of that. It's actually increased mistrust, and will frankly continue to do so. How will the public, take a look at our mainstream media if the media companies get what they're hoping for, and have a situation where 25% of their journalist costs are covered by tax breaks from the government through the journalism tax credit, and they want another 30% of their costs covered by Google and Facebook? Now, how can you trust an environment where more than half of the costs that they're facing to bring journalism are funded either by big tech or by the government? Suddenly, you're just not arm's length anymore, in a way that I think people can look at that media and say, this is something I can fully rely upon. And I think that's an incredible harm that may be visited upon us based on legislation. And I just want to quickly say that there are alternatives. We've had a number, including papers and others, said, listen, if you want contributions from Google and Facebook, force them to put some money into a fund and use that fund to directly fund journalism, no matter which the organization. Put forward grant applications or other kind of proposals. They'll fund it. They've got no influence over anything. All they're doing is putting some money in. And now we stop funding the bondholders of Post Media, or these other kinds of large entities who then sort of influence their coverage. And suddenly it's open and available to everyone, and it's focused on journalism. I should note, and I raised this when I appeared before the committee on this bill, the word journalism and journalist only appears less than a handful of times in this entire bill. They keep saying it's about journalism, and they barely even mention the word journalism or journalist in the entire legislation.
Yeah, of course, dude. I mean, yeah, you don't want to give away the farm. You don't want to tell people what you're really up to. You don't want to talk about that. What you want to do is you want to keep those lines blurred, and you want to keep, friends in high places, still friends in high places. And this is an election thing, dude. If I look at this from Trudeau's thing, it's like, fuck, if we give these guys a couple $100 million, of course they're gonna advocate for us. And I mean, you see it here. I don't see anything in the province of Ontario about Doug Ford and his involvement in the Emergency Act and the convoy. And I don't want to get into that because we just spent an hour and a half doing it. But, that's my biggest concern. And it's easy, Michael, it's easy for me to sell against that. Like, we in our investment deck, and we just went through a round of NCAP. In our investment deck, and I'll send it to you, we use mistrust in traditional and mainstream media as part of our sales strategy. We use it because 28% of Canadians trust traditional media. 28%. 30% of Canadians trust the journalists that work for those outlets. 30%. That number has gone down like 20, 30 points in the last 5 years. 20 to 30 points because of this very thing, and they're reinforcing this very thing. So where are we at in terms of the Senate and C11? I know that it's passed and they're giving it the once through. I know Pamela Wallen is not a fan of this. I know Paula Simons is not a fan of this, and I know Bill C-18 got trashed yesterday with some senators as well, just in terms of conversations. But do you think that these bills will become law? Do you think that we're going to see this Liberal government kettle free speech through this algorithmic bullshit with C11? And do you think that C18 will receive assent? Like, what are your thoughts, and how do you feel about where these things are now in terms of being activated?
Yeah, not particularly optimistic, to be honest. On C11, it's already passed the House. I think there is some reason to believe, for some of the reasons you just.
That's
it did, but it never made it to the Senate before the election. Now this is as far as it's gone in, and it's gotten, you know, it's nearly there, because of people, as you mentioned, like Senator Simons, Wallen, and then a bunch of others that quite clearly would like to see some changes. I think there is some reason for optimism that the Senate gets it and.
Do we lose him?
Will be open to making some amendments or some adjustments. It's still early days, but there's not really reason to be optimistic. They're just pushing this ahead and hoping people don't pay a whole lot of attention.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's our government at work. It's the best. Michael Geist, you can follow him at michaelgeist.ca. That's where his website is. You can get his podcast called Love. It's tremendous. If you don't get a chance to go and listen to his podcast, which is on his website, is it called Law Bites? Is that
it is called Law Bites. It is.
Law Bites, exactly, yeah. Yep. You know, when you know what you're talking about, and then you question it because you're like, Law Bites, but he doesn't do law. He does internet. Okay, it's internet law. Yeah, Law Bites, which is terrific. It's on the front page of your website. It's on the right-hand side. You can tell that I've been there. You can tell that I listened to it. I just had spaced out for a second. But Law Bites is the name of the podcast, michaelgeist.ca. There is a ton of really great information, origin story information, and how you followed this whole thing around. And really broken it down. And I super appreciate you spending some time with me on a Friday. And I know you probably want to go be with the real doctor of the house, so I'll let you go. But I want to thank you very much for doing this, Michael. Really appreciate your time.
You bet. My pleasure. Have a great weekend.
You too, bud. Take care. Michael Geist. michaelgeist.ca is where you can find him. Got to pay attention to this shit, especially if you're in this industry, right? Or if you have an internet account of any variety. You're going to get regulated. Justin Trudeau wants to regulate your right to free speech. He really does. And then what he wants to do is give hundreds of millions of dollars to his friends in traditional media. Bell, Rogers. That's why they don't write about shit. It's not so much what they say, it's what they don't. It's not so much what they write, it's what they don't. It's not so much what you see on the news, it's what you don't see on the news. And you're getting it. You are seriously getting it. And this guy smiles while he's fucking you. Justin Trudeau. He does. And he's like, dental plans for kids. Yes, great idea. But then secretly and quietly, he's got guys like Pablo Rodriguez trying to kettle free speech in this country through the internet. Seriously. That's what he's trying to do. And win another election by giving all the media companies in this country hundreds of millions of dollars. And then shutting out anybody else who has a difference of opinion by not giving them any money. There will be no, if this Bill C-18 goes through and big tech has to pay everybody like us for the stuff that we give them so that they can make money. Listen, they're not giving any money to us. I can guarantee you Justin Trudeau's government isn't giving any money to us. They'll give it to people that can help them. That's what Michael Geist wasn't saying, and I'll say it. It's basically bribing people. The people that don't need it, who already have the ability to lie to you and have you go, well, fuck, that's got to be the truth. It ain't. Mr. Godius, Locke would have lost his mind today looking for Fun Friday. Yeah, Locke mocked me about it already. I'm like, we're having Tom Marrazo and Michael Geist on. He said, that's a fun Friday. It is for me. It is for me. Anyway, that's it for us. I don't think I'm overstating it, Linda. Linda's like, I think Dean's overstating it. I don't think I am. I think I'm understating it. We haven't even talked about it. It is going to be a problem. Bill C-11 is going to be a problem. Bill C-18, if it passes, is going to be a problem. Not for Bell. Because they just keep lying to you. So it's like, fuck, just give us more lying money. Same with Rogers and the Torstar and the Post Group. And I mean, these aren't people that are telling you the fucking truth about the news that's going on in the world anyway. These are people that are trying to fucking affect change for their culture. They don't give a shit about you. That's the problem with mainstream media. That has and always will be the problem. Their executive relationships matter more to you, to them, than you matter to them. They don't give a fuck if you buy their stuff. Click on your stories. They care that they get paid to fucking sewer people with. They get paid to fucking just write this nice thing about Doug Ford. It'd be great. Okay. Write this nice thing about Pierre Poilievre. Okay. Like the National Post. That's just an agency for fucking idiots. Conservative idiots. It's all it is. Same thing with the Sun. Post Group of Media. Fuck. Just a joke. Chatham Asset Management. So it's an asset hedge fund that owns National Post, and they're going to get minted by the Canadian government. So the Canadian government is literally going to take from conservatives and take from taxpayers and give a Chatham Asset Management, this fucking hedge fund in the States full of uber rich cocks who hate you, by the way, and love abortion, love it. And they're going to give them hundreds of millions of dollars. Suck on that today when you think about Bill C-18. Not overstating it, understating it, because we haven't talked about it enough. It was a fun Friday, wasn't it, Stone Sea Witch? Who goes by the name Stoned Old Bitch Witch now. Anywho. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and I agree with other people in the comment section. Can the Leafs get rid of the digital board ads? I have a seizure every time a hockey game's on. Last night was fun. It was an overtime win. Nick Robertson had a great game. But I fitzed out every time I would change the ads on the board. It's so weird. Anyway, have a great day, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Don't forget to say hi to our friends at Easy Auto Financial. These are good people that help you get financing for cars, and they make this show possible for you as well. Free financing, turnkey purchasing a vehicle, everything that you need, and they'll do it for you. Super, super simple. EasyAutoFinancial.ca. Check them out today. Also, Rob Kivlikin, my man Rob, defense attorney. He's got a whole bunch of defense attorneys. There's no shortage of people that are caught in legal jams, legal situations where they need help getting out or help getting in. If you did something you didn't do, or if you did something you shouldn't have done, or someone's blaming you for doing something, there's a legal ramification to it. Whatever the situation is, you want to get your life shit straight. You've got some legal stuff that's been hanging over your head. The only people that care about you as a person in the legal world are my friends at kivlaw.ca, Robert at kivlaw.ca. Check him out today. Send him an email. Say, hey, Rob, Dean gave me your number. He not only will he treat you like a human being, he'll make sure you get taken care of. Robert at kivlaw.ca. Defense attorneys here in the province of Ontario, specifically Southern Ontario. If you've got an issue, this is where you need to go. Kivlaw.ca. Check them out today. And of course, hello, everybody at Ed's Fine Imports. I'm coming in there tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to get a new pair of underwear, and then they're going to like me for it because I always pay for my underwear. This is the thing. I don't get anything for free there, but you do. Gitch3 is your promo code. He'll send you a free pair of underwear when you use that promo code. I've already used it, and he's like, you do. We kind of work with us, so you can't really use the promo code. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I tried, but you get a free pair of underwear. Gitch, boxer briefs, pouch in the front. Can't miss. You'll love them. Love, 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 love. And he'll send you a free pair. When you use promo code GITCH3, edsfineimports.com, tons of different colors. He's got luxury boxer briefs, pouch in the front, super breathable, very soft. The only underwear you'll ever buy, and I'm very particular about the underoos. Very particular. You should be too. So go to edsfineimports.com, use promo code GITCH3. You're off to the races. Have a great day, everybody. See you on Monday. Locks back. Fun Monday. See you then. Bye.